Now let's look at the solution to question number 10. Question number 10 comes from the category of long answer question. So the instruction clearly says attempt the following question in 100 to 150 words. Make sure that from the given two alternatives, the one you choose, you are aware of the value points that are necessary to answer this, because as far as the marking scheme is concerned, this question particularly carries how many marks? It is a question of 8 marks. So the distribution of marks is clearly laid out. Content carrying 4 marks, expression carrying 4 marks. So out of the 8 marks that I require, I have to be very good in terms of my content so that these 4 marks are clearly sorted, and then write in correct simple English to get the expression 4 marks clearly. Now the first one here says, why was Nelson Mandela overwhelmed with a sense of history? How did he succeed in ending the apartheid regime in South Africa? If you recall from the chapter The Long Walk to Freedom, the value points necessary for this question have to talk about the struggle of Nelson Mandela. Let's try and see those value points one by one. The first one says Nelson Mandela was overwhelmed seeing the blacks and the whites in jubilation after they had won. So begin from the very first instance where the speech is being highlighted. Then moving on, he was happy that they were treated as equals among dignitaries in the same soil they had been treated as outlaws. Focus on his emotions. Moving on, in the first decade of the 20th century and before his own birth, the white-skinned people of South Africa patched up their differences and erected a system of racial domination against the dark-skinned people of their own land. Thereafter, but now in the last decade of the 20th century, and his own 8th decade as a man, that system had been overturned forever and replaced by one that recognized the rights and freedoms of all people regardless of the color of their skin. Thereby, Nelson Mandela had to undergo many hardships and suffering for his countrymen. Focusing on his struggle, you move on to describe that as a patriot, he sacrificed the comfort of his home and loving family, and he was declared an outlaw for demanding equality for all his fellow black Africans. Similarly, he was punished, isolated and put into jail. Also, he and his comrades were oppressed and tortured beyond tolerance. He suffered hunger, oppression and injustice, but kept the fire of independence burning in his heart. So the emotional aspect, the struggle aspect have to be talked about equally. Now, if I look at the conclusion, his courage, persistent efforts and sacrifice bore fruit and gave South Africa freedom from apartheid on 10th May 1994. So, if you highlight this part, you clearly establish that the question was talking about how the system or the regime of apartheid was successfully removed, and you have managed to prove that. If you picked up the second alternative, the option here which says describe the journey of Siddhartha Gautama becoming the Buddha. Here you can easily draw a character sketch of the early life of Gautam Buddha, which is as Siddhartha Gautama, the royal prince, and thereby his transformation or the enlightenment that we talk about. So the value points would incorporate Gautam Buddha was born in 563 BC. He was born in a royal Hindu family as Siddhartha Gautama, and at the age of 12, he was sent away for schooling. He studied all the sacred Hindu scriptures. Thereafter, at the age of 16, he married a princess. They had a son. For 10 years, the couple passed a happy life. That is the early life of Gautam Buddha. And Siddhartha was shielded from all sufferings of the world. Then came the transformatory stimulus. So, from here, once he went out hunting, on the way, he saw a sick man, an old man, a funeral procession, and a monk begging for alms. He was overwhelmed with grief. So, this is the transformation. And you explain he renounced all the worldly pleasures and luxuries offered by royalty and went out into the world to seek enlightenment concerning the sorrows he witnessed. Essentially, after attaining enlightenment, he gave his first sermon at Banaras. It reflects wisdom on suffering, and you can easily say that here Buddha talks about or tells about the universality of death, which is inevitable and can't be escaped. So the significance of the last sermon along with the transformation of Buddha, giving the nature of life that he lived prior to this and after enlightenment, becomes the complete answer. I hope this value points were explanatory enough. So let's look at the next question in the long answer segment.